Well, this week, SportsCenter has been asking the question, why not Canada? What are the chances of an NHL franchise moving to Winnipeg, Hamilton, Quebec City, or Toronto? Now, the league insists there are no plans to move any teams, but with some franchises in trouble, it might just be a matter of time. Dave Naylor winds up our series by looking at which existing teams are the most likely candidates for a move and which of our 4 Canadian cities have the best chance to be their new home.
Vancouver, 2010.
The golden goal!
Sidney Crosby's gold medal goal was proof to the world that hockey is Canada's game. Quite a different mood from the mid-1990s when the Winnipeg Jets and Quebec Nordiques left for the U.S., done in by a sinking Canadian dollar, skyrocketing salaries, aging arenas, and the fact no one wanted to own the teams.
That's where the story of the NHL in Canada has changed most. A decade ago, when the Montreal Canadiens were for sale, not a single bidder stepped forward from within the province of Quebec. Last spring, when the team changed hands again, there were 4 of them. And with Jim Balsillie for Hamilton, Mark Chipman and David Thompson for Winnipeg, and Quebecors Pierre-Karl Paladeau for Quebec City, there is no shortage of investors wanting to own additional NHL teams in Canada.
It is quite possible that with the right ownership and the right arena arrangement that we could have additional teams in Canada.
While Jim Balsillie is not in the NHL's good books, the league has no such qualms with potential owners in Winnipeg and Quebec.
What we're looking at now is interest by substantial people who would like to own a franchise.
Part of what's opened up this door is the rise in the Canadian dollar, which continues to flirt with parity to the U.S. greenback. And projections are it will stay that way.
I don't see any kind of attack on the dollar in any time over the next 5 or 10 years. So I think the dollar should not be part of the equation at last. That's a good news. And I think that is not something that should stop any team from being successful in Canada right now.
But if the dollar did dive, teams in smaller Canadian markets would have better protection thanks to the league's revenue sharing system. And there's the salary cap. So while running an NHL team remains an expensive proposition, runaway costs are a thing of the past.
You are protected against the higher spending teams, which you would have seen previous, that taking from your players or losing a lot of your stars. So you're able to keep a team.
But while there is reason for optimism, many Canadian hockey fans are still skeptical the NHL wants to add more Canadian teams.
I guess I can understand to a certain extent how that conclusion's been drawn by those who opine on the subject, but I think if anybody had had the experience that we've had in working with the league, they would come to the exact opposite conclusion.
The future, the short future of the league is to go back where there is a base fan, a big base fan. And where is that? It's really in Canada.
You could look at a market that might be 3 or 4 million people, and it might have an NFL team, an NBA team, a Major League Baseball team, and a hockey team. I'm not sure that just because the market's bigger, it would be better than a smaller market that had no professional sports, and the hockey team would be the only team in town.
Being buried behind other Major League teams describes the situations in Phoenix and Atlanta, 2 franchises at the bottom of the NHL revenue scale, and neither one is tied to a long-term lease, making them the 2 most likely candidates for relocation.
You cannot blame, the commissioner of the NHL. You only try anything to keep the team where they are. But at one point, if it just can't work, they are going to make a move, that's for sure, for the best of the industry, best of the game, best of the players. And I think they are going to look at where the fan base is bigger and stronger.
So where might the NHL go? Let's review the ratings for each of our 4 cities we've examined in this series. When it comes to the attractiveness of the market in terms of population, corporate presence, and other economic factors, Toronto rates an A+, Hamilton an A-, Winnipeg a C+, and Quebec City a C+. But to get a final rating, we factored in arenas, potential owners, possible legal problems with neighboring teams, and whether the NHL is interested in the market. The results were the exact opposite. Quebec City came out on top with a B+, Winnipeg was next with a B, Hamilton fell to a D+, and Toronto to a D-.
Could Southern Ontario support another team? Probably. It's nothing we've studied. My own focus had been and has been to look at the places where perhaps we could go back to the fans that once supported us before we look at somewhere new.
For SportsCenter, I'm Dave Naylor.
And we're joined now by the man behind the series. Dave Naylor is with us. And Dave, I want to ask you, when you got to travel around the country putting these stories together, what was the reaction like from people that you met along the way?
Well, there was tremendous interest and curiosity because this is a topic that so many people, so many fans have opinions on, and yet there were so few facts that people actually knew. So there was real curiosity about what we were doing. The other thing about this story is it is business, it is culture, it is sport, it is politics. It combines all of those things. And let's say there was so much interest. Even this week I was in Regina doing a football story. I got on the plane, and as I was walking down the aisle, someone said to me, "Hey, Dave, are you bringing hockey to Regina?" So there was this sort of, everybody was aware of what we were doing, and I think it got tremendous following.
So you start the series, and like you said, not a lot of facts, but you uncovered a lot of stuff along the way. So what did you learn, and more importantly, were there any big surprises that really jumped out at you?
Well, I think the most important thing we learned is that the four markets we looked at, Hamilton, the Greater Toronto Area, Quebec City, and Winnipeg, there's no compelling reason why, as markets, any of those would not work for the National Hockey League. I think in Quebec City and Winnipeg, the margin for error is more slim. If you don't make the playoffs for 9 years, if you run your franchise poorly, it's not a home run because the markets are smaller. But I think it's surprising for me personally was seeing in Quebec City and Winnipeg just how far and advanced and mature the drive to get the NHL back there was. It was really a bit of an eye-opener.
Okay, so you make a case that all four might be viable markets, but if you were a betting man, which one would you pick to be the first to get a team in Canada?
Well, I think the challenge in Southern Ontario is the territorial rights expressed in writing by the Toronto Maple Leafs, and as it pertains to Hamilton, also issues with the Buffalo Sabres. It seems the National Hockey League is not anxious to test those waters, and there would be some legal debates about what the Leafs or Sabres' rights are. For those reasons, I think it's much more likely that you see a team in Winnipeg or Quebec City. If the Phoenix Coyotes are in play next winter, I think there's a good chance they could go to Winnipeg. And if that publicly funded arena comes online this fall, as it's expected it will in Quebec City, they're certainly going to be in play as well, because that is a huge, attractive carrot for the National Hockey League.
Well, fascinating series, great work. And if you want to check out more on Why Not Canada, you can do so on tsn.ca or check out the Globe and Mail.